backdrop of Silicon Valley.
Okay.
It's really kind of interesting. It's not news in a way because you kind of know about it, but he
Hmm.
articulates some really interesting stuff. And it's like, how like dropout, like dropping out, is part of the mythos um, of Silicon Valley, and how that like might actually um, the kind of like dropout culture of the 60s. He draws these like really interesting lines between the kind of California dropout culture in Silicon Valley, and then like Ayn Rand, and the notion of genius, and
Mm.
other stuff that's and the kind of like the mantras of like disruption and stuff like that. It's a really simple book, but it's a really interesting. It's I mean it puts into a very short book and categorizes something that we all kind of innately understand about Silicon Valley, right? About how kind of like puddle deep the thinking is and where it
Hmm.
comes from. I found it like really, found it really interesting.
Okay. What is the name of the book?
It's What Tech Calls Thinking by
Ah,
Adrian Dabb. I'll find it and I'll drop it into the notes here.
yeah, please. Okay. Yeah, it's interesting. And you guys, what were you doing these days? Oh, cool. Thanks for the link.
Oh, quick, that's it.
Sorry, it's a bit loud on my side, so I constantly need to mute my mic.
Oh,
But yeah, I mean, I'm reading a very non-work related book, The Resurrection by Tolstoy. And it just reminded me of how much I hated Tolstoy in high school. I read both War and Peace, Anna Karenina, and some short stories because my best friend said it's one of the best authors. And personally, I'm a Dostoevsky person. So I remember that I described Tolstoy as a telenovela writer. He is made just for soap operas and dramas. But this one is really good. I think it's much better than the other. And it teaches us something really interesting, which is that most people have a weak side, you know? Like it's so hard to empathize with these characters. It's like, it's almost like I'm thinking about these successful people who tend to oversimplify sometimes the reality of the situation, and then you get these Tolstoyan characters who are kind of so self-entitled, and then they make such a big fuss about how they are guilty of something, and they take it up to all these morals and try to become self-righteous. But you see that they also simplify that reality just to come on top of it rather than navigating it. You want to create a story about your success, but it's just a gory
hmm.
demise at the end.
Yeah. Well, interesting.
I don't know, I was just throwing a lot of thoughts. I didn't make up my mind of what is going on in my life right now. It's January 18th. John, please enlighten us.
Oh, goodness. I really don't know what to say. I'm still just trying to get into 2022, I think. Without, I'm trying to be different this year, not stare at my computer screen so much, but failing rather miserably. I don't know. I don't think I've quite got into the swing of things yet.
Mm.
So I'm still hanging behind a little bit, and I'm wondering now what to do. I think with 2022, I did focus a lot on design in 21, and I probably need to focus more on the kind of work that I do as opposed to writing stuff about design, which directly give me any employment opportunities. It's interesting research. So I've done a lot of research and a lot of writing, and I think I probably need to move a little bit more away from that and do some more practical stuff that gets me work.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, I understand your. I can relate to that experience as well. Yeah. Yeah, I just by the way, I can read you a tweet that I shared on the Slack random channel. I loved it because to me it sums up some of the mixed feelings you have like at the beginning of this year. I'd like to cancel my subscription to 2022. I've experienced the 14th day free trial, and I'm not interested anymore. I love this. Sounds like, it sounds not so different from last year, by the way, until now for me.
Year?
Yeah, 2022 is like.
The year in general.
I mean, for me, sounds like a good continuation of what happened. Like, you always think of end of year and beginning of the next year like a big something, like a big event, like a big, closure on something and opening on something else. And actually, it's just in our minds because, the world doesn't have an agenda with 31 of December and 1st of January doesn't work like that. So it's funny how we, create these narratives for ourselves to say, oh, can't wait for next year to, put all my problems of this year back behind. But they tend to follow you, right?
Have you guys seen Death to 2020 and then Death to 2021?
No, what is that?
Oh.
Netflix has launched these short mockumentaries.
Really?
Yeah, I did see that. It kind of reminds me. Do you remember Newswife? The Charlie Brooker thing? Charlie Brooker, I think, is even in Death to 2021. But I think I know the ones you mean. They're funny.
Yeah, I mean, the first one, the Death to 2020, was funny because, the year was crazy, but then 2021 was a strange continuation of how we didn't learn much, and it was just a repetition. And I think, I found it quite boring, but now, as I enter in 22, it's like, it's even more repetitive. I mean, nothing happened, no Trump riot, at least on the 6th of January last year there was some action. Everything is just monotonous. But on the personal side, good things are happening because of that continuity and the work of been done. But the trend, I don't know. I'm finding it difficult to map.
Yeah. So I'm trying to make things different. Like I'm refocusing on my spare time and trying to relearn how to draw and paint. That's my thing. So I'm taking some times that I usually take to write or do other things to do that. So study back all the classical approach to draw faces and bodies and landscapes and stuff like that. So that's my focus right now. And this is funny because I watch an animated series during December, and this is the trigger. I said, oh, it's so beautiful. I want to draw like that. I want to make something as beautiful, as satisfying to watch and look at as this. And so I will try. Yeah, we'll see.
It's cool. I haven't been drawing lately, and I usually like drawing, but I'm out of inspiration at the moment. How's the Chalet, the French one? How's that going?
Yeah. So last time we were like 3 people, and one from Quebec, and we had like Jonathan that is coming sometimes on this session, who joined the French one, and we discussed about definitions, and if there's a need to have a clear definition in mind when we approach things. And that was interesting, a bit philosophical at some points, but we managed to, bring this back to reality in some way, to like concrete stuff, like say, okay, well, we agree that at the end, the definition matters less than being able to act. So whatever the definition we have, if it's enough for us to find a way to navigate and act, it's fine. Although even if they are not perfect, or if they are if the definitions are questionable at the end, it's not the big deal. So yeah, it was interesting, and yeah, I learned that in Quebec, the people are not speaking so much English, and that's maybe an issue. I don't know, but at least for the person that was here, it was somehow an issue for him, and funnily enough, on the opposite side, he thinks that there's not so much content about design in French, and that's a shame, because there's a huge history about design and French-speaking side of the thing, right? So that's interesting, like a paradox, because it's true. Everyone I know, even if they speak French, day to day, they are writing stuff in English for most of them. And and I don't know, I have ideas about why it's the case, but I don't know why it is so much, like this. I don't know exactly all the reasons and the causes of those, but there's something around the fact that we want to be, marketable, and the market is mainly in English. That's a reality. But that's not only that. I do think that we want to speak to a majority, and the majority is in English today. In most of the fields, the new ones, I would say, all the digital aspects of the work is mainly in English, so it's kind of unavoidable, In the traditional design, I would say it's less true, because in product design, like physical product design and architecture, there's tons of things you can find in French and in respective languages, I would say. But digital design and the new tendency around digital product design and stuff like that, it's mainly all in English. So yeah, but I think that it will change. But the truth is that this kind of titles and domains of expertise are coming from the US, from most of them, with the type of work and technologies and startups and enterprise that revolves around those kind of professions. So it's not so surprising that it is the case, but I'm waiting to see the appropriation of those in the respective cultures and languages. Although I do think that there's differences in how we speak about design in general in the French-speaking side compared to the English or American way. So there's already differences, but it's like a mixed bag for now. Not a bit like sure. Yeah.
I mean, in terms of English in Quebec, it depends entirely where this person would be from. If they're from Montreal, they would have
He's at
most.
Quebec City.
Yeah,
So,
that's a completely different.
yeah,
There's Montreal, and then there's the rest of Quebec.
yeah.
So yeah, so I could see that. The other one too, and you would be the person to answer this in a way, and it ties into the notion of definitions.
Hmm.
What do you call design in French
Hmm.
when you're referring to it? Right? There's this because design is an anglicization of dessin, right? And
Yes.
originally, but that doesn't.
It has a double meaning.
Exactly.
It has a
That's
double
right.
meaning because it comes from the Italian language. It's not.
Disegnare, yeah.
Yeah, disegnare. It means like dessin, like um, it's like having an intent, and at the same time, it means like drawing, but
Right.
like defining stuff more in this sense. So,
Right, but currently on your calls in French,
mm,
what word do you use to describe design?
design. We
Exactly.
say design. We use the
Right.
same as everyone. Yeah.
And I wonder, I have no idea, this is pure speculation, but
Mm,
language matters.
yeah.
There's as there is no original term in French that encompasses the idea, is that one of the reasons why why
Hmm.
the writing is, you know what I mean? Like I'm not,
Yeah. That's a good question. That's a good
it's
question.
it's a question. I have no skin in that game. I was kind of wondering about it.
Yeah.
But it's one of the reasons why I picked up the book What Tech Calls Thinking, because Silicon Valley has an unhealthy control over the kinds of thinking that goes into a product, right?
Yeah.
And so that's one of the reasons why it's important to understand maybe when people talk about it. And there's so many mentions of people like Peter Thiel and the kind of faux libertarian, kind of
Hmm.
ethic
Hmm.
that goes along with that kind of thinking, and that it's a lot of what it is a post-rationalization of self-maximizing entities, right? In terms of problem solving, and it's really about the
Hmm.
market, and it's about, right? So even if you think about IDEO or somebody else like that, they have a very specific definition of what a solution is.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's market first and whatever else second, third, last. So
Hmm. Which is less predominant in the, I would say, in general, in the European culture, and especially in France. It's less predominant in the type of thinking and the type of and the type of work. At least my feeling is about the type of work designers want to do. It's less about market and more about market and the social aspects of it.
yeah, well, there's a markedly different conception of the social contract in Europe
Yeah,
than
totally.
there is in the U.S. And there's Jeremy Rifkin wrote a book called The European Dream, which he basically compares it to the American dream. It's a Jeremy Rifkin book, so it's not like deep philosophically, but it's historically based, and it's a fairly good kind of elucidation of that difference.
Yeah.
Of the way that the collective is imagined as strength in Europe and as weakness in the U.S.
Mm-hmm. And then the predominance of the self of the individual and the freedom of each individual, and I would say the freedom of doing and owning in the American culture is a strong one, and in the sense of as you mentioned, and in the libertarian sense of it, like which is less true in, or not in the same way. If it's true, it's in a different way. In I would speak for France and Switzerland, from what I know. Okay, not for all the Europe, because there's variations of this understanding. You go on in Germany, it's already a bit different, the relationship. And I don't know for the UK, but I do feel it's different as well. But yeah, we have a word to express design in the sense that we use it in today, I would say. It's conception, conceive. We conceive, and we can use this word to replace design in most of the discourse we have about design in France. But yeah, we use design because it's like this kind of words we use in in our field. Like we have some words that we have, actual good words in French to express the same idea, but because people don't necessarily associate these words to the meaning and all the ideas behind, we prefer to use the English version, because now we have like an insurance that's in some way that people understand the type of ideas that we want to vehiculate with the words. It's less about the word itself. It's more about all the baggages that it brings, all the things that it brings with it. So and because the culture about digital design was shaped mainly by this early software design that emerged in the Silicon Valley. We have this inheritance of words and meaning. But there are really valid concepts in French that I think we can draw from architecture and traditional design objects that are totally valid and totally relevant to discussion that we can have around digital product design and stuff like that. But we don't, and do feel like it's more like about the fashion around the concepts and the fact that we want to sell those ideas. So it's easier to use the existing lingo and all the words, because it's already pre-packaged, so we can we can move forward with those more in an easier way than if we have to redefine everything in French. I don't know. That's my idea, but this is how I understand it.
Does it affect the design process, or is even the design process kind of assumed, like fully formed, like out of the valley? Does it affect the way the practice happens?
So I do think that the most of young designers today that works in the digital field learn the design way of the Silicon Valley, not necessarily all the historic around. I don't know if it's really an issue, to be honest. There's some people that are really strongly against and criticizing digital design because it's it's like recreating all the stuff that the old designers already knew for like 50 years and blah blah blah. But I don't know if it's really a problem, but the fact that they used like let's say the design sprint, and that we have a lot of schools teaching design sprint today in France and Switzerland. And they use all the books and all the the framework and all the canvases and stuff like that with English words written in it. I do feel like it's one of the reasons, and it makes people closer to an idea of what is design in in international way. It's like it's necessarily English. It's necessarily efficient. It's necessarily about removing frictions and this kind of. I'm simplifying here. I'm not saying that everyone thinks like that. I'm just saying that there's a type of idea of what is design and what it means to be a professional designer. It means learning English and means speaking English, and it means so the English is associated with the profession, and I think it's one of the reasons that it is unavoidable that we have to speak and write in English at some point. Although I'm sure I can find a digital product designer that speaks just French and has never written anything in English. I'm sure I can find like this kind of person, but I would say it's like more a general feeling about it. So it's not grounded in proper research. It's my feeling.
Yeah, but you could look at the grand scheme of things and see that we are in this process of assimilation. Like 100 or maybe 150 or 200 years ago, you had French, which was kind of the big language you would have to learn to be a sort of intellectual. So in a lot of instances, people wouldn't translate. They would just use the word as, with the right pronunciation and just meaning what it means in French rather than what it could mean in the other language. Mainly, I think, based on the conception that, traduttore, traditore. So like the translator betrays the meaning. Because I think it's with certain concepts so volatile, like design, it will take us a little longer before we can recreate it in different languages. And I think I see this in Romanian a lot. We don't have words. We don't have words to describe these innovative ways, these design processes. We just, use the English terms because it takes a lot longer to be able to embody it in the language and maybe move it to the next phase. But I think it's only natural that one movement starts with a language that is popular at the time, and then it kind of shifts back and forth until it finds balance and it, takes over and it's assimilated by the culture, because the language is flexible, but it takes time for the culture to find an appropriation in that specific space. But if we're becoming more globalized, I think the key would be to sort of develop it in different languages, such as French, German, Mandarin, and you could have these big, monoliths of a language that exchange at the same level, and they are equally evolved and can describe the same objects with their own vocabulary. But I think, we're still very, not so uniformed in terms of development, and we have different priorities. I mean, you see, the English word is so design-oriented and about innovation, and we're thinking about disruption, and we're using these words, we're overly using them. And then maybe, any word in Mandarin or, any Eastern language, but I'm sure that they rarely use these words. They have a different ways of looking at what is a crisis or what is a priority in their business space. Of course, they understand that these things are important, but it's their spin and their packing of things that differs.
Yeah, but that's true that it is interesting to see the cultural aspect of, some people are saying that this is a form of colonization of the cultures, and a form of the fact that big American companies are so big and so popular in so many countries are a form of imposing, ways of doing in those countries and those cultures, and by extent you can draw similar ideas about the fact that with all of those companies and all of these professions that revolve around those companies, all the teaching and doing and stuff like that that goes around, necessarily comes as well with this kind of yeah, I would use the word, but I'm not sure if I'm using it properly. So colonization. And it's interesting to see it this way. I won't say it's necessarily evil intentions about this kind of aspect, because I do feel like any leading position puts you in this kind of type of tensions with the with the rest of the space where you share with the others. So at some point, it's always true in some way, I would say. Now the question is clearly, how can you, if you want to make it more like heterogeneous and more mixed with other cultures and less in a form of colonization, you can imagine to want this kind of situation where you can adapt the knowledge in respective languages and cultures. But yeah, I'm not sure it's well, I don't know if it's really always in this case always a problem, right? I'm not saying that, but some of the consequences of this cause problems. I do agree, but I don't know if I don't know if it's necessarily a big issue to say that because we could use, if we wanted, we could use French words for everything we discuss in French, about design. So it's it's a bit more complex than that. But yeah. So we discussed about that, and recently I was reading some interesting stuff that I think links back to this idea of being more social in a way, about the social aspects of what we are doing. And I don't know if you saw, I shared something in the Slack. It's about I don't know if I shared it, by the way. Maybe, I don't know. I don't remember. I would do it if I didn't. But it was about should we have to lose faith in UX design for all its unintended bad consequences, and should move towards something else. And I will share the article because it's interesting to read, and I think it's an interesting discussion to have, actually. And not necessarily, because it's not really about UX design. It's more about the context in which it is used, and the fact that there's some kind of cognitive dissonance around the fact that we serve business people for most of the cases. Most of designers works in companies, and those companies have business objectives, and the only reason we exist in those companies is to serve those objectives. So in that sense, there's a cognitive dissonance between what we think we should do is improving people's life as designers, and the thing that we are asked to do, and the reality of it. Like, say, if we take Facebook as an example, and one of the worst as an example, we say as UX designers, we helped the business do what it does, and we help it be efficient in what it does, and with all the extent of the consequences it has on the world, and the fact that we see Facebook like having strongly bad impacts on social lives and around the world. And now the question is always like, should we feel like we have a responsibility necessarily as individuals and designers in that or not. And I think it's an interesting discussion to have, because there's extremes in positions to hold in this discussion. Is to say it's not designers' fault, it's business fault. And the opposite of that is to say, as designers, we conceive experiences, and so we should know when it's bad, and we should not do it when it's bad. So to me, it's two opposites, and we have the gray line in the middle, and we can find like interesting ground to explore, right? So it could be something that we would like to host in the community, because I do feel that this is something that will, that was not a weak signal, but more like becoming a strong signal over the years now about this kind of problematics around our practice and the consequences of the practice in some contexts. And maybe it will be even more present in the discussions around design and UX design in this year. I do feel it's my thing.
Yeah.
So
no, I think it's good. John, were you going to say something?
Well, I was, but you carry on, Mark.
No, go ahead.
I'd be interested to have a look at that article, Kevin.
Yeah, sure.
Because the thing that makes me comment is when people are questioning digital design. I have a significant problem with the whole concept of digital design, because for me, most digital design is maybe digital is a technology, but the impact of the design is far wider than digital. And I think that's where you're going with what you were saying, Kevin. And I would say that the question that you ask is very little perhaps to do with the UX designers, but anyone working in Google should be asking themselves that question, whether you're a manager, whether you're involved in digital or not. You are working for that organization, and the question of morals within an organization has always been there. If you work for Ford and you continue to treat people as cogs in a machine, what kind of life are you giving to people? So this discussion has always happened, and I would certainly welcome that. But I would also see there's a difference between the moral aspect, which is very important, I think, but also to do with, hang on a minute, as UX designers and other types of design, service design, what is our true role? Because the true role, although physically is digital, the impact, especially in the public sector, the impact is far-reaching. And it sometimes is the responsibility of designers to stick their hand up and say, hang on a minute, what are you guys doing here? So an example is in the UK, we have traditionally we've had, if you're a person in need in society, you would be able to go to the government and say, hello, I don't have any work. Can you please help me with paying me some unemployment benefit? And I've got nowhere to live. Can you help me pay my rent? All of these kind of things, disability payments and all of that. And some years ago, the government in their wisdom thought, let's put all of these together in one system so that if you are disabled and you don't have work and you have this situation, you will go to one place and they will calculate how much of the benefits you should get instead of going to these separate places. And it sounds very reasonable, very logical. The reality is they created a digital system which you can only access digitally, that is based on, obviously, on a logical design. But when you understand that many of these people's lives are completely complex, they're not logical. When some of these people try to engage with the system does not adapt to their needs.
Yeah.
So when I work in the public sector, there are many people who think they've applied for something, and 3 months later they find they haven't because of an error. They haven't been looking at emails because that's not what they do. And they've lost 3 months of benefits that they're never going to get back. Now, for them, they're never going to make up in their lives that amount of money because it's everything to them. People have committed suicide. People have had terrible family relationships and brought up families in the wrong way, all because of this new system and the way it works. And it causes huge amounts of problems in society. It's the number one reason why many people fall into debt is what we call universal credit. It's this damn system out there. And a lot of service designers are very proud that they were part of it because it was a big job and all that kind of thing. But the reality is it's damaged society and it's still out there sitting there. So for me, it's helping designers to recognize when they are designing the right things in the right way. It's not just a nice website, not just a clever design, not just the right standard design where you've only got 4 options. It's very easy. That's a very limiting way for me of seeing design. And that's why I'm quite passionate about systemic design, because it then forces people to look at the whole service.
Agree. And there's a saying that I think sums up what you just said, is hell is paved with good intentions, right? So it kind of sounds like it, you know. And I think that's one of the discussion we should have is one of the issue of doing digital design only and seeing problems only through this lens is that digital is about formalization of, you know, interactions.
Yeah.
And this is an issue because everything cannot be formalized and, you know, put in protocols and simplify it. It's not the case. And I'm just, you know, I was filming around in my little town how, you know, historical buildings and more recent decisions was made and the impacts on how people navigate the city. And compared to if we had to think about the same kind of thing in terms of digital services, there's things that happen in the city that would not happen in a digital way because you have space to improvise, you have space for, you know, things that was not planned, that you can go outside of the expected path that you cannot do on a digital service. And that means you need like informality in the interaction, and it's one of the thing I'm thinking right now about.
It would be a great discussion. As long as it's together with examples, I think that's very helpful because a lot of the discussion that happens, it very quickly becomes theoretical.
Yeah.
And I find that that's pointless. We have to start with reality of what really happens out there. Because UX design naturally focuses on the majority of people, and there are people on the edge that, well, they're on the edge, there's not many of them. In a private sector organization, you can say, well, we won't sell to them, you know, that's fine. You know, McDonald's does this. I don't eat McDonald's, but they're not going to say, oh, John Mortimer doesn't eat McDonald's. Let's create a new product just for people like him. No, there's no money in it. Forget it. Don't worry. I don't have a problem with that. But when you're going to the public sector, when you're talking about Facebook, when you're talking about these things which have become, I don't like to use this word, ubiquitous. It's become something we all use, or else you can't really live in our society. Then the responsibility turns the other way. It's society that should be shaping Facebook, not the other way around. And suddenly, a private organization isn't set up to be like that.
Yeah, that's true.
But digital has produced these new moral dilemmas that we don't really know how to resolve yet, because private sector organizations are untouchable. They are private. There should be no interference in them. That's the current capitalist model. that
Yeah.
has to change. And it is changing because there's all sorts of rules now about what you can put on Facebook and goodness knows what, that's suddenly lurching towards censorship. I mean, you know, this is a huge problem, and maybe it's not a good idea to get into the level of detail of that, because that's probably going to take a long time to resolve. But pulling back and asking UX designers, maybe the question is, how can you recognize when you are working in a situation that maybe is not optimal, that you can then contribute to identifying that? Because the example I gave with universal credit was, this was predicted by some people at the very beginning when the whole idea was just thought about. The people that designed it had no concept of complexity. As soon as you know about complexity, you would realize, oh, hang on a minute, this is a complex system, and we are going to apply something that is going to be standardized to a complex situation. What will be the outcome? All that would have needed to happen at the very earliest stages is for that to be questioned. It wasn't questioned. That's all that would have been needed. So it's not a huge, I'm not talking about a huge moral discussion, but maybe how to identify the moral aspects of some of these things, rather than trying to resolve them.
Would it have an impact on, if the point was raised, did anyone listen, and did they stop it, you know, right in the middle to say, oh, whoa, we are heading in the wrong direction? I'm not sure of that. And it's often the issue, right? It's not in having people telling you that maybe it's a wrong idea for good reasons, but you say, oh, there's always people saying this kind of shit, you know, like, you know, they're telling you that you're wrong and you should not do it. And in many, you know, actually in many business books, it tells you right away that if you hear people telling you not to do it, it's the best reason to do it. And I don't know where the logic goes there, but okay, but this is what you can hear and read in so many places, that it's a confirmation bias, that you should do it. And
absolutely.
And so you need to change the framework in which people operate at the basis, exactly. You know, and so it's hard to do. It goes way beyond, well, the explanation I gave about this UX thing. So I agree with you. It's
no, and I think that bit would be very interesting to discuss, that part, because you're absolutely right. If you're an innovator, a lot of people will say it won't work, and you have to go against what they say. You know, that's part of innovation. That's part of creativity. That the best designs have come from that place, and we have to be able to distinguish between new ideas and the fundamental principles. And complexity is about fundamental principles.
Yeah, I agree.
So those fundamental principles will not be broken, and that's the definition of a fundamental principle, is that it always exists. The politicians of this country and the civil servants of this country were completely unaware of complexity. If they were aware of the principles of complexity, and if someone had helped them to understand that, it would have happened that someone would have said, hey, hang on a minute, that doesn't work. And in this country, we have a terrible history of implementing nationwide digital solutions, and several years later they completely fail, and the government has paid for them, and they have to bail them out for millions or billions of euros. And that was one of the discussions at the beginning of this universal credit. Was politicians said, is this going to be in one of those white elephants, we call them? No, of course not. No, it won't. You know, but I think this is about helping to educate decision makers in some of those basic principles, and that to me is the power of complexity and the power of systems thinking as well. If they'd understood, I'm not talking about a deep level. You know, just honestly, the Canadian framework would have been enough to say, well, the system looks like that, and the solution you're asking for is in the wrong corner.
Yeah.
Just to have that discussion, maybe, you know, in the future, this is where we're going with this, but not then.
Mark, you wanted to say something?
Oh, it's past.
On that topic?
No, I was thinking. Well, one of the things. Yeah, no, it's good. I was just listening. It's good. I think part of it was this kind of notion that if you go back to Raymond Loewy and beginning of design, right, that kind of notion of taking industrial things and making them more palatable to the consumer, it's always been about, making the consumer's choice easier. And one of the things that's happened in this splitting out of like user experience design from design proper is that it tried to kind of like escape that in some way, but it can't. You can't escape that fundamentally design has a marketing and consumption aspect to it from its earliest definitions in the U.S. Right? Like that's kind of built into it, and so there is this. There's an inescapability to that definition of it that you'll be working upstream against. And one of the things that happened recently was, and I had to laugh because it was so incredibly cynical. We were looking at something and somebody was talking about growth hacking, which is essentially like a UX thing, right? How do you kind of accelerate the consumption flywheel to make it happen?
Yeah.
And then somebody else in the conversation said, well, what if we have a different definition of that? And I said, well, why don't you think about what actual value you're delivering? And then the person who was talking about growth hacking says, oh yeah, value engineering. And I just like threw my hand up in the air because no matter what you try, somebody will come up with a euphemism that can then be commoditized, right? So all of a sudden from growth hacking, it got switched into like value engineering and you're like back exactly at square one. So there's this black hole like pull towards making things more suitable for consumption at higher rates. And I just think there's a lot to overcome in this discussion, but I think the discussion is a really good discussion to have. And I'm just kind of skimming through the article. I'll read it in more detail in a bit, but I agree. It's something that we should definitely, one of the themes that we can definitely talk to over the coming weeks.
And it's not so much about UX, in fact. I do feel like the title and I mean, most of the points that was made in the article are misleading because of that. Because people talking about these specific subjects are coming from UX design and looking at the issue from this standpoint. And so that's what makes the discussion relevant for UX designers. But the discussion is far beyond this. And one of the article that is listed as a reference to the discussion in the article is a reply to this guy whose name is Mark Hurst, that I follow his writing, who first wrote this article, Why I Am Losing Faith in UX, about a critique of UX design through the lens of business objectives and capitalism and stuff like that. And someone replied and said it's not the point of designers to redefine what is capitalism. And if it's the discussion we want to have, then it's far beyond design itself. It's society, And although it's maybe extreme as a way to formulate it, I do feel that this truthness in this statement, like it's not just design, it's just how we all agree to, function as a society. And if it goes too far in the wrong direction, that's a societal discussion that we should have. And by the way, we don't have so much of those kind of societal discussion in our society. It's like we all accept in some way that things are not so good, but it works this way, and we don't. Even the politics and the politicians are not really interested in that kind of discussion anymore because It's about, their own objectives and how they can be there in the next years. And it's about pleasing more than, having tough discussions. So I'm simplifying again all the points, okay? But
What's interesting, and I think, John didn't like to use the word ubiquity or ubiquitous.
yeah,
But I think that there's a stage beyond ubiquitous that's even more dangerous, and that's naturalized,
yeah,
right? And I think that Facebook is there or on the verge of that, where the problem with naturalization is that they quash the imagination of an alternative because it's been posted now as just kind of like a natural fact as opposed to an artificial creation, right? And on the flip side of that is designers, makers, when they see the impact of something like that, should have faith that it does actually make a difference. Not in the positive necessarily for this case, but you can have massive ripple effects on what's happening to the point that some of these ideas become naturalized, right? And I think that that's this kind of idea that you have no power or that you are powerless in this as an organization that makes something digital that can that basically has the ability to wield a very material hammer on society, shows that there is possibility for large scale change.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's tough.
But at the same time, it's it's interesting. It's really an interesting discussion. At the same time, people are just realizing now the extent of the change because of the the bad ripple effects of it, like the intensification of the wrongness of the of what happens, not because of all of the change themselves, but like the third order of consequences that happened, or maybe even more than that. So it's like, yeah, sure, there were change, and this is a good example of big changes, although the consequences are bad, but at the same time it shows that people just realized way after the change were in place, that because now it's like wanting to stop like a train in at full speed now, because the engine is hot and the train goes fast, and we are picturing the train going fast because now we are perceiving its fastness in some way, and the impacts it has on us. But it's the train is already moving, I don't know if you get the point.
No, I think what happens, I mean, and this is conjecture, but feels like it might be heading in the right direction. As you have a new system of relations that come up, it takes a while for the traditional corridors of power to exploit that new network. And it is the effects of the exploitation of that network that we are starting to notice.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think that's kind of what's happened. And that's where it has this kind of like soft and fluffy, shiny new kind of moment. And then the traditional powers understand how to transform their old school power into the new school power and exploit those new avenues and networks. And therefore you have a new conception of power held by the same people. And that's what becomes evident. And so I think that's where you get the delay, and that's where you start to see it. So once elections start getting manipulated, hackers start taking over, the country or political system start to get altered, or news, for example, or truth, or any of that, then that's when all of a sudden you see the evidence, it bubbles under the surface until somebody starts to wield it, right? Again, I have no specific expertise in that area, but it seems to be what's happening.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons why I have a bit of a problem with libertarianism, is because if you take it to its like utmost conclusion, or you push it to the edges, it's Mogadishu, right? It's Black Hawk Down, essentially. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie, but that's
No.
That's libertarianism to the full, right? Yeah, basically it's warlords and complete lawlessness and that kind of thing. So you push anything to its extreme, and you.
I think I shared on Slack. I shared on Slack something that is really close to what you're expressing. It's a guy doing like a scenario-based modelization of a society living around these concepts of anarcho-capitalism, and he's doing all the description of anarcho-capitalism and the consequences it has, and so he takes a population and arbitrarily says, okay, this guy is inventing this kind of service that it sells to the population, and he's taking the lead on selling water, I think, to a city, and how through the acquisition of wealth over time, he ends up ruling the city by just selling water at the beginning, and now, just having his hands on all the infrastructures of the city and stuff like that. It's interesting because it shows that without any regulation in the system, you can end up with like nightmare situation.
You know where we have so many channels. Do you know which channel that was in?
Good question. Probably in random or links. I don't remember. But I would try to find it from Kevin and Tammy's. Cool. If I don't find it, I will share the link anyway because I think it's really good. No, it's probably maybe I didn't. I read and listen to too many things at the same time, so sometimes I
hear you.
Peter.
My stack of ongoing books is uncomfortably large. I need to do better at not getting distracted.
Here. Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I didn't. Okay, so I will share it. No way, no problem. Because it's really interesting, and I think it's relevant to the discussion because some people, I do feel like some people on the, on the Silicon Valley side are feeling like this is the next step in the form of capitalism that they would like to see, because then it removes any, blockers in their ability to do what they want to do. And although maybe it's a bit extreme as a proposal, I think it's interesting.
Futures?
From I will share it. Sorry, I need to find the link back and. And I share a link now. Sorry, with you, and I think it's another discussion that we should have at some point. It's about education and design education, and I shared it in today. So this one for sure I shared it on the links channel. And it's about fixing the two key problems in UX CX education. And I think it's generally interesting as the discussion goes around education in general. I mean, it's and it's about stop telling people what they should do to be good designers and showing them, like, having the what's the name, the educator or trainer, I don't know, actually do the work in front of the students and showing them the thought process and speaking aloud, thinking aloud, uh, what what he does and why he thinks it's the best course of action, and what are the heuristics that he used as a way to know when to do what, and etc. etc. And I do feel like you can extrapolate from that, because I don't agree with everything that is said in the article, but from a general perspective of education, like grounded it to, practice and doing and maybe shadowing, like that students shadow the the um, the expert or the person that knows. I think it's interesting as an approach. It's close to what the military does, basically in training the recruits. It's putting them in a real context and having someone that knows what are the best things to do in this kind of situation, showing them and asking them to repeat the movement, even if it's meaningless for them at this point. It becomes meaningful as they do it in the context, because they see the, the repercussion of this kind of doing in this kind of context in the end, and so they know at the end why they were asked to do it. It's something that relates to how students learn from sensei in Japanese culture as well. There's a whole logic about it that is really interesting. So yeah, it's the two things I think are really interesting. And this one about education is really interesting because we see now that's certifications and boot camps are everywhere about everything, and you can learn in 2 days to be a designer or a service designer, or I don't know what, a writer, whatever. I do feel like it's interesting how we want to speed up the process of learning without taking into account the context and the context sensitive knowledge, this kind of thing. So yeah, I spoke too much today. Sorry, I was like over you every time, all the time. Sorry for that.
No, these are good. I like.
I'm tired by talking. It's like, oh no, wrong sign of.
I like the fact that there are some things like in the pipeline, like themes that we can gather around, right?
Yeah.
I think that's good. I think both of these themes are interesting to wrap some thinking around. And I like, there's also something about knowing what the theme is ahead of time.
Mm.
So you can poke around and read. It gives direction to the kinds of thinking or prep for these discussions, which I think is nice too. I mean, without losing the magic of the stream of consciousness kind of approach that we've taken. It's nice to have something to look at. These are both really interesting. And we have Diana to speak for all of Europe and the UK and Switzerland.
I'm actually thinking about how interesting it would be to have these conversations in an actual bar, have a real drink, and we're sitting around a table and you have this real environment around it. How would it feel to have these same conversations? Probably more enjoyable, I'd say, but I can only dream of the design community to be a physical space to exchange.
Yeah. Don't worry. Next time we do it on the metaverse, with Facebook VR sets and it's the future. We have to do something about it, right?
And I was just thinking, how many times have I clicked on and filled my glass again? Like, what would my bill be at the end of the night? I'd but for these eyeballs.
It's okay. The community budget will cover it. If anything, we could just get some beer from the supermarket and we sit by, a beach or something. It's going to be much cheaper.
It's
But
true.
yeah, I mean, these discussions, are worth having and are really engaging as they are in here. But it's a different thing to actually bring them into a different real space, to take them closer to a movement of action, and it's not just the stream of consciousness, just getting lost into the virtual.
Are you feeling being reduced to a square on the screen? Literally.
Women are used to being objectified throughout history. No, I'm actually fine, but
No, I agree with you.
I hear, the background noise here is just lame, so I wish there was something more entertaining to create a sort of a more complete space. We are now in these partial spaces all the time, in this in between, like your foot is in Kumo and the other one is outside in your living room or anywhere else, and this disassociates a lot, and it's really hard to focus. How do you give meaning to all this? But I don't know.
I want everyone to come in Switzerland and see the show of the lack of Neuchâtel next to my house, and then I would love to invite you in my little town. So there's everything here. We can we can have a really good time, but we have to plan for that. We have to.
Well, I'm still holding out hope that you're going to go to your Quebec conference and stick around for a few days.
Yeah, I will have to. Yeah, it's still in discussion, to be frank. But I want to come. I really want to come. Yeah. So I will try to make it happen.
I've only got the dog, so I can make like decisions unilaterally as long as I accommodate her.
As long as the dog agrees, it's not so difficult, right?
Well, she'll get grumpy. She's going to sit in a car across an entire country, right? I have to make some concessions along the way for sniffing and running and chasing a ball and that kind of thing. But, she's a good co-pilot. She's terrible with maps, though. Totally abdicated the responsibility as a co-pilot. I have to do that all on my own. But,
Well, then I gotta go, because in here, of course, it's 8:20.
Yeah.
So it's getting late.
I have to go as well. I have to go as well. That my daughter's prepared something because it's my birthday today. So So I have a
happy birthday.
Thank you.
Kevin. Have a drink. Have a drink on me.
Thank you. Sorry, Mark.
I said you could have let off with that, but at least I'm glad you've got a fancy drink with an umbrella in it now. Or no,
you got a birthday drink.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so there's
we cheer for you.
There's a surprise somewhere in the house for me. So.
Go. I hope you become wiser and live a long, healthy life and become content.
I'm 33 now, so I'm really wiser.
Jesus time.
Yeah.
You're a baby.
John.
But how old are you, Mark, if you don't mind me asking?
John and I are probably pretty close to the same age. I'm in my 50s.
Me too.
So, yeah.
I have a long way to go to catch up with you.
Are you? How old are you? Are we allowed to ask?
Take a guess, and I'll tell you after.
That's the best answer.
There's no way I'm going to do that. No way on earth.
This is it. See, so as you know, both John and I are over 50, and therefore we are not prone to fall into that trap. You might want to try somebody else. Less experience.
25.
I'm 24, actually.
Ah, there we go.
That was
Yeah.
very close. Good job.
Okay.
Yes, that's why I'm always grateful to have these conversations with you, because I get to learn so much from you and your
From the
experience.
graybeards.
The giants.
That's a nice way to say that you are old, guys.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you. Thank you very much. That's a very nice way.
Well, we'll be all in this position at some point, you know. So to be the
My back
oldest,
hurts, so I'm pretty fast at catching up.
yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you're lucky, you get old.
Yeah.
All right.
Then
Okay.
Thank you guys, and see
Bye,
you in the
everybody.
next
Yeah.
chalet. Take care.
I'm off now.
bye bye.
Next
See you. Take care.
Bye.